So Tony, thank you so much for coming on Retain or Die. We are really excited to talk to companies, people like yourself, building things that are focused on retention. I think it's a huge underappreciated lever for a lot of companies. We work primarily with SaaS companies. I know you work with SaaS and some subscription-based companies. I had a look at your background, watched some other podcasts and videos with you. It seems like you come from an entrepreneurial family. You spent a lot of time at a startup in your previous life, going from, I believe, from support up to president, which is a pretty amazing pathway there. So you've kind of seen a lot. And so ProsperStack being a company that helps not just with retention, but I noticed that you're doing sort of conversion stuff. You're doing a bit more than just that cancellation flow work. What made you get into this? And like, why is this something that you're making like a big bet on personally?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's fun to talk about because I think it was, like you said, a sort of a long time coming. My background growing up, my parents were entrepreneurs and I always kind of had that appreciation and desire to want to do that myself one day. And I was way more into computers than they ever were or anything like that. And that led me down sort of the tech path, and I was able to join an early stage startup, right out of college, and really grew up with that company. And that one in particular was in HR tech space and was bootstrapped. Before there was ever like the word product led or, that was a buzzy thing, that's essentially what we did is we had free trials on the website. People came in and plugged it in and plugged their credit card in and really just kind of went off and used the software. And I think that's just such a great model. And there's pros and cons to everything, but that was kind of the basis of where I grew up in SaaS and just really loved it and dove in. And ultimately within the back of my head, always saying, I would love to have my own venture someday. And it was at that company where I met, my now co-founder and CTO, Graham. So we kind of have the tech and the business side of the business covered. And as far as like what we were going to build, we had a lot of learnings at that prior company. And one of them was that in the world of PLG, you have this kind of really automated acquisition and your funnel from kind of start to end. And there's not a ton of human interaction in between, or at least there doesn't have to be. And we found when people churned out is we just kind of thought it was like a big black hole of, why did they leave? What was the cause? What are they looking for? And we just didn't really have that relationship solidified to really get the answer from everyone. So there we'd implemented Stripe billing and done a lot of really neat things. And we kind of had this light bulb moment where like, well, why can't we create like a retention platform that's just super easy plug and play for SaaS companies that have a million other things to build that's really core to their product? And, we started with cancellation flows. And like you said, we branched out beyond then, but that was kind of the start of the idea. And that's where we started with ProsperStack 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think it's great when you see the problem firsthand, right? And experience that. You said you kind of started with the cancellation flows. Actually, so we talked about this before hitting record. So I was looking at LinkedIn, saw you come up, and one of your posts about this, over 30 days, I subscribed to 100 plus SaaS products just to learn about their cancellation process. And you came up with two key learnings from that. One being that true retention efforts are rare. And the other is that a lot of SaaS companies, and I know I'm guilty of doing this, make it hard to cancel, right? It wasn't our primary thing when we're building our product. It's not like, all right, let's make sure the cancellation's easy. Right. That didn't come up, but I would love to just work through that. If we could get even just like down into the weeds here, what are some of the tactical things? Like, so you said that retention efforts are rare. What does that mean? Like, so you're just not seeing companies even try? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah. Essentially ever since the start of building ProsperStack and even on an ongoing basis, like I have a spreadsheet with probably 150 rows in it of screenshots and examples of cancellation flows from various companies that I've interacted with personally. And plus it, helped, shape how we wanted to, the kind of best practices that we implement in our software. So we're just learning from what's out there. And yeah, I think, one takeaway was that, not a lot of the companies really offered me an incentive or like a reason to stay, or even try to like overcome an objection that I brought up in the cancellation process. Like at a bare minimum, maybe there might be a survey, but then really beyond that, there wasn't a lot. And that was definitely one thing that was kind of a takeaway from there. And then others where, I'd sign up for a software and I'm like, well, I'm in the billing area, the subscription area, like why is there not a cancel button here? So I started going through, sometimes I'd find it in an FAQ, sometimes I'd have to email in. And, I just feel like, if you're able to, and this kind of goes back to, a lot of things that the FTC is talking about and other things that we can probably get into later, but those are essentially like, if it's easy to sign up, why am I finding it hard to cancel, right? And it's sort of like however easy you come in the funnel is however easy you should be able to exit. And, what you do at that point is certainly up for interpretation, but I think there's just a general lack of either realization or priority of companies to really use the cancellation flow as a means to retain customers. And, we've shown that we can 30-40% on the high end, cancellations can be deflected through these kind of, and again, not dark patterns, patterns, not dark tactics, just common sense, like, hey, why are you leaving? Okay, well, you mentioned price or you mentioned features. Let's document that. And if there's an incentive I can offer you that's really speaks to that and maybe your data and your product usage, why not give that second chance to kind of correct that? Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe it's an opportunity to improve the product with their feedback, whatever the case might be. But there's certainly an opportunity to retain at that point.
Yeah. You mentioned in that 30 to 40% of customers here, they could be retained. So I guess maybe if we take a step back, that to me sounds like a really obvious reason like why you should be paying attention to cancellation flows. Mm-hmm. Can you put that into concrete numbers that you've seen for companies? You don't have to name anybody, but just, just to, for anyone listening that hasn't implemented any sort of retention efforts, any cancellation flows.
Yeah.
What's your pitch? Why do this? Why make this a priority?
Yeah, I think I always, when I have conversations with founders or growth people or customer success people at our clients, it's generally like, oh, I didn't really know a solution like this existed. And when it comes to should I do it or not, it's essentially a revenue center. Previously what was just going out the door, you can pay a quarter of that to us and retain 4 or 5x what we're charging you easily by just plugging something in that already has built all the Stripe integrations, built all the Recurly integrations, the stay integrations, the recharge, you name it, and you just really plug and play into your workflow. So I just think it's such a unique product that has very tangible ROI where so a lot of times you might get sold a CRM and you're like, well, yeah, there's ROI there, but I have to equate it to man hours and how much time I'm saving and that kind of stuff. But this is real dollars that we're walking out your door and are no longer leaving. So it becomes a fairly easy sale sometimes in my mind to do that.
Do you see any stumbling blocks? When you maybe you onboard someone to ProsperStack, are there things that companies should be thinking about or doing before they start this, or is it pretty straightforward? I would imagine that over the life of ProsperStack, you've seen a lot. You're baking a lot of that into the product. Those learnings are coming through to your customers. But Are there any sort of maybe little hiccups or hurdles that you see people sort of stumble on when they start doing this?
A big advantage is if you're using kind of one of the more recognized, popular billing subscription management platforms out there, you're going to have a leg up in terms of integration. It is a product that you have to embed and, do just some minor kind of JavaScript type embedding and stuff. But if you've been around longer, maybe you've got a custom billing model that you have to account for on your end. It's going to take a little bit longer. So I would say the more standardized you are in your billing stack and your billing approach is not only for us, but just other tools that you can utilize and use and plug in, whether it's revenue recognitions or retentions like us, dunning, more passive type churn. The more standardized platforms you use it, and when you use them in the ways they're designed, you're going to have a much easier time integrating with a suite of other products, not just ProsperStack.
Yeah. Some of the other things that you're doing now too. So there's the cancellation flow. You've gotten into conversion incentives, which is kind of that's going back to the start, right? So that is, is that on both sides? Conversion incentives is to maybe bring people back as well. But what got you into that side of it?
Yeah. We always knew that we were very interested in the broader retention market, specifically as it relates to our ideal customer profile, which tends to be, it can be a SaaS product, more of a media, newspaper subscription, or even a box physical good subscription. But the common thing that kind of overlaps for all of them is that they're all subscription end users, and they are either consumers or they behave similar to a consumer. So consumer to small business, right, is the end user of our client. And for us, we want to stay true to that user and serve them in lots of ways we can, and that meant going outside of just the final stage of the life cycle. And we want to kind of take this engine that we've built, which is a really sophisticated customer segmentation, rules-based engine where you can determine what offers and incentives they're going to get at the point of cancellation, and now kind of flip that and say, hey, we've identified this customer as someone who is maybe falling out of our product-led approach, using a SaaS company as an example. And we want to incentivize them to get them back in the app and try it. And we might do that through a discount, or we might do that through a trial extension, or things in automated ways that are reactionary to what they've done in the app already. So you can identify customers that are likely to upgrade and not offer them anything at all, and those that maybe have fallen off that kind of ideal path, and try to get them back on and self-correct. And similarly, like you said, you can do that post-cancellation. So people tend to buy again from products and services and companies that they've done business with in the past. It just might not be the right time for them to be a subscriber, but you can incentivize them to come back through the same kind of means that we're using to prevent them from canceling in the first place, through discounts or through promotions or special plan types, or even just use the data that you received in the cancellation flow to say, hey, you left us because we lack this feature that you cited. And just so you know, here's what we've done since then. And as a thank you for that feedback and an opportunity to come back, here's a incentive for you to give us another try. And that's really what we're trying to stay true to, is kind of automated touch points around the customer lifecycle.
That's really cool. I really love the idea of incentives based on their activity, their behavior with you and your experience with them already. Do you have any advice on how to think about that? Like, or even just examples of, if it's kind of hard, across a billion SaaS products, subscription products, whatever. But are there any concrete examples that come to mind of, when a customer behaves this way, you offer a discount. When they behave that way, it's some other incentive, other carrot that you can dangle in front of them? Do you have any like best practices or advice on how to think about that?
In terms of the conversion side, the most common thing we would see is, typically like a SaaS product might have like a basic setup guide or a basic kind of getting to start using the product guide. And, they know if a customer engages with that, or if they get 4 steps in or 6 steps into their 8-step process, whatever it might be, they've got a pretty good chance that they're going to make it through an upgrade. Well, if they fall off, I think that kind of easiest part to fall off is immediately after sign up, right? If they don't click that welcome email, if they don't get in the app right away, they might just be gone forever. So we can engage them within the app, outside of the app now, in email, SMS, and really try to re-engage them. So I would say that's a concrete example, whereas if you've got like an onboarding flow that you've already invested in and built, and that if they, from like a step-by-step basis, what your conversion percentage and your fall off is you can use that as a trigger to then re-engage that customer and really try to incentivize them to come back in and give you a try. And you can do that automatically through like a product like ProsperStack.
It sounds like there's a lot to think about, but it's actually not that complicated, right? I feel like this is one of those things where it could almost be intimidating. It's like, I don't know where to start with this. So let's take that thread and sort of pull on it here. So where would you suggest someone starts? Is it on the front end? Is it on the back end? Or does it matter? I guess it's really a question of the company. It's like, where's the leaky bucket right now?
Yeah, I think like early stage companies, it's always like an acquisition conversion problem, right? Like you don't even really think about churn until all of a sudden you notice, you're like, hey, we've got as many people walking out the door as we do in the door. So you're trying to figure out your product market fit, you're trying to figure out your acquisition strategies, what channels are working best for you, and you put churn in the backboard, which is totally understandable. Then once you hit a point of scale, you're like, okay, now I need to address churn and do that. So typically customers find us when they really hit that spot. Certainly like in the life cycle, if you're an early company, like conversion might be more appealing to you, or like a really nice customer portal with a layout with like a basic cancel flow. But really to invest in that, typical customers of ours are going to be in the hundreds to thousands of cancellations per month. And that's where they're really starting to see churn as a pain point, and really where you're starting to see real money walk out the door, and saving a percentage of them is meaning real dollars, which then affects what I can spend to acquire them, because everyone's working off of different ratios, CAC to LTV, right? And if we're improving LTV for them, we're opening up more dollars on the other end of the funnel to acquire more people too. So I would say that's normally where people kind of jump in with us. It would be like when that churn's really hitting a pain point of generally hundreds to thousands of cancels per month.
And what's working for you to reach those companies? Now I'm talking about you as ProsperStack. Like what's working for you to get in front of those people at the right time?
Well, we do value our partnerships with the various billing platforms out there. So generally, we're present in their marketplaces. We're trying to have good relationships with their partnership people and kind of keep top of mind for potentially in their salespeople's minds, so they can bring us into a situation where it makes sense. Otherwise, those marketplaces are a great place to discover us too, in terms of how we grow and find customers. We've played around with SEO. We've done SEO, obviously. We try to write very targeted informational pieces, especially around, in the last year, there's been a lot of talk about like the legal aspect of things and what states are doing what. We try to, without giving legal advice, which of course we can't, we just try to summarize things and interpret them as we can and put them out there. And we find a lot of people engage with that content. And we just, trying to be useful. And it also is good for us to obviously stay on top of that, because people come to us as looking for advice and hey, what would you do in this situation? And every company has sort of a different risk tolerance on that regard. But
yeah, it's certainly seen the same. So something I've seen you talk about before is re-earning customers every 30 days, which I think is a great framework for how you think about customer retention, right? So do you have a framework for thinking about that? Just unpack that, right? So re-earning your customer every 30 days so they don't walk away. I'm thinking SaaS businesses in particular here. Yep. If you're on monthly billing, what does that mean that you have to re-earn their business every 30 days?
Yeah, it's something that really clicked for me in the last company I was at. And we were a subscription model, and I would say 95% of our customers were month to month. And it could be a volatile industry, and it was an HR tech, so we worked with a lot of recruiters and staffing agencies. And as the economies went up and down, you would have more churn, less churn. If things were going great, more people wanted to get into business, more people are hiring, it all trickles that down that way. But it really clicked on me that with the competition that we had with a month to month kind of billing subscription model, which is very prevalent in SaaS and software, and is really it seems like every industry wants to be a subscription model now, right? You go, things you bought previously that you never even thought would be subscription or subscription. So Yeah, it was just something that kind of clicked to me, and was like, I just think it's a mentality that you want to have, which is, making sure that you're staying on top of the industry, improving all the time, because your customers can leave you on a whim. And if you're not having the mentality that you need to earn their business every month when they renew, and that credit card gets digitally swiped, so to speak, then I think you just have an easier chance of kind of resting on your laurels or falling behind competitors that are really still trying to find their place in the market and are kind of hungry to take your business. So it's never been easier to switch in SaaS. It's never been easy. There's more competition. Someone's always going to be cheaper, so you have to really have that mindset that you need to earn that business every month in order to keep it and retain it.
And as a business owner, with that context of it's never been easier to switch, it also feels like it's never been easier to start something. So competitors can pop up practically overnight. And,
absolutely.
I mean, it feels like people can copy things really quickly now, which is not great. And I think a lot of people see through that pretty quickly, but you have these little, people take shots at you, right? Where they can hurt you a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, how do you think about that, right? Staying as the choice for this kind of work. With relation to that, re-earning your customers every 30 days, how is your team thinking about making sure that the value's there so that they don't get to that cancellation flow, maybe?
You're definitely correct. Like the competitors, like we see them kind of spin up often, and they come and go, and there's a few that have been around steady and others that have come and left early. But in my world, people ask me this too, and like, oh, I've got this great idea, and how do I start it? Or, maybe we should build this. And I'm like, I guarantee you 100 other people have thought of that idea, just so you know. But I think there's very few, like there's a million good ideas out there, but it takes the right team and the right mentality to build it correctly and run a company like that is like worthy of doing business with, right? So what I mean by that is they could copy us in 2 days or a week or whatever, just like a basic feature or something like that. But like, are they customer centric? Are they supporting you when you need their help? That's really the difference. And are they building like a product that can scale and like have the technical know-how to do that? And, have they scaled apps previously, or is this someone who just fired up like, an AI quick program out of their basement, right? And I just think that those things are more important than the feature race, than the bells and whistles to some extent. Obviously you need all that stuff, but really just kind of understanding industry, being there for your customers, listening to your customers is what's going to set you apart. It's not going to be, feature A or feature B necessarily, or who's first to market with something. So obviously I think there's importance to that, but I put a lot more faith and stake into the latter and being really, customer focused and building your company and your product through their eyes too. And really, especially those early customers, like treat them like gold. And, they were with you early. They took a chance on you to the extent you can. Don't raise their price too much, but, and just continue. They're always happy to give good feedback that, can help you in the long term, way more than they're paying you. So
on that, right? Like the collecting feedback thing and going back to the cancellation flows. Churn happens, right? I mean, I think that's just that's a fact of life. It will happen. There's a variety of reasons, right? So, I wish it weren't so, but it will always happen. And sometimes there's really good reasons for it. But I would love to know, just looking at your own customers, how does ProsperStack use ProsperStack? And what kind of insights do you pull out from that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's not one it's one that we get often, even from people that are looking at using our product. And what's interesting is that we are essentially like a true B2B software company, so we're not necessarily like fit for our own product to some extent, right? Like typical like monthly end user pricing for our customers and their end users would be somewhere between, I would say, less than $100 a month is pretty typical. And ProsperStack is B2B and it runs a little bit more than that, but we don't have a ton of churn as a result. We don't have 1 million customers as a result. We're a B2B software company, and we have customer success, and we're very hands-on with our people versus more of like a product-led, hands-off model. So we do have ProsperStack in our product, but I think we learn a fair amount more from our like one-to-one interactions than it is. But our churn is also very, very, very low. Like we sub 0.5% monthly churn, so it's
amazing.
Yeah, we hope that holds. It's something that we're proud of too, and it means that when people buy us, and that means we're selling to the right people. It means that we're providing value to our customers and that they don't want to leave, right? So I think there's opportunity for us to perhaps have more of a tech touch, product-led model in the future that we would 100% maybe like for startups and companies that are just wanting to get going. Maybe we can provide something for them that they don't have to build right out of the box, and they can just plug us in and then when they grow, they can hopefully become paying customers. But we haven't really gotten to that point yet, and we're super busy working on like a lot of those other customer lifecycle touch points we've talked about a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we have it in there. I wouldn't say it's like incredibly perfect for us as a B2B software company, but yeah.
I love that. That churn rate is enviable. I think that's fantastic. I'm excited to hear that. I'm going to use that to segue into a question from a previous guest. Something that we do here is ask everyone that comes onto Retain or Die to sort of pay it forward with a question. And I've got one from Derek Skletsky. He's the Chief Product Officer at community.com. And it sounds like a simple question. It could be.
Okay.
It sometimes can trip people up though. So the question is pretty straightforward. Who owns churn? And I guess what I'd like to do is like put this in the context of the work that you do for your customers. Like, what do you see? Who owns churn at the companies that you're working with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. And like you said, it sounds simple, but I've seen it a million different ways, and I have my own opinion on how it should be run. But I would say early on, we talked, our first kind of in with the company tended to be like a customer success type role. Although interestingly enough, like the data that we collect as a result of cancellation flows tends to be super useful to marketing teams so they can correlate, are we seeing higher churn in different channels, stuff like that. So we've had customers tell us that, hey, every Friday morning on our all hands meeting, like I go and grab this report and this report, and we share it every week to everyone. And I'm like, well, that's awesome. I love to hear that stuff. But yeah, I think, in general, we work with customer success teams that probably own that metric. But I am seeing more and more like growth oriented and growth specific teams that we're working with. And it's a great, natural position for us to talk to too. And and even to that regard, retention specific teams. We've met with and worked with, head of retention at companies before. And these are titles that I don't think existed 5-6 years ago. I think, definitely becoming more prevalent, even customer success to that matter. When I started in SaaS, there wasn't even a concept or idea of it. It was, maybe there was an account manager that like checked in with you, right? But really enabling success with the product is something that, we're big believers in. And I think it's a really important angle. And I think it's just the importance of retention that has become so obvious with higher competition, higher cost of acquisition. You really have to work on retaining customers to make that whole formula make sense. It's not just acquire people cheap anymore and let them spill out the other end because you could acquire more. It's really, trying to figure out ways that you can hang on to them long term so you can make that whole math equation make sense and become a profitable business. Yeah, I think how I would look at it though, from that regard is, someone has to own and track the metrics. So internally, customer success does that for us. But to me, the entire company owns churn, and it's not customer success problem. It's not a marketing problem. It's a holistic problem, knowing that is the right customer coming in. Do we have the right mix of products and features that are satisfying the needs for all the opportunities that we have coming in? And then once we have them as customers, were they sold correctly? Were they sold the right solution? Did they think it did something that it didn't do? And then is customer success doing their job and enabling it? Is customer support pleasant to work with, timely, responsive? Everyone's got, a piece of that. And yeah, I that's how I look at it anyway. So it's really not any single person or part of the organization. It really is holistic.
Yeah, I agree. I'm laughing because I feel the same exact way. And I feel like it's one of those questions where it's, you're never going to put a pin in it and say, it's me. And that's it. You said something in that answer there that you see teams from marketing and teams that you wouldn't necessarily think would be involved in this and get value from the data on its surface, right, are finding value in it. And that's the part of all of this like retention work that excites me the most, is that actually I feel like everyone in the company should be looking at these reports, this feedback, and because it does impact how you look at even the top of funnel type stuff. Are we bringing the right people in? Because I think it's another thing that I've seen you talk about is that, if you don't bring in the right fit customers, you're fighting an uphill battle there, right? So do you see maybe you just have thoughts about this internally as well, but like a path for getting this data into the hands of other teams, like selling it to marketing and saying like, hey, you should be looking at these numbers because it can help you do X or bring us in the right kind of leads? Like, what do you see any best practices in the companies that you work with for sort of disseminating this data across their company? Yeah, no,
it's something that we think about internally. It's like once we're in, it's like any business when you sell software to it, right? You don't want to be dependent on one person's job being there to like own that. They're the only one that knows who you are and what you do, right? You want to affect as much of the organization as you can in a positive way. So if we can get our champions to share more data and tell them where it comes from and show them the usefulness of this, I think you're just not only going to have more ideas on how we can better utilize ProsperStack, but we'll also do a better job of showing the value to that organization internally too. So, and maybe that's the reason, where we have strong churn rates at the moment. We try to advocate for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, like the stories I hear are, typically, whether they're all hands, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, or like, periodic reports to C-level people where they can, pull churn specific reports that they didn't really have great detail of before, and even break it down by, core reasons why they're leaving, and then compare that to a trend line from 6 months prior to say, like, how are we improving this? If the CEO says, well, hey, we're losing a lot of people because of this, what are you going to do to fix it? And then measure it and show me later. That's where we're, producing some reports that are really useful to other parts of the organization, and help them identify, potentially a channel acquisition issue too. Like, we're seeing a higher churn rate. Okay, let's slice and dice that by customer segment and see, okay, this segment has spiked in churn. Why is that? Hey, marketing, this segment, has come in and they're churning way more. Where are they coming from? Oh, that's a new channel that we just started spending on. Well, it turns out their LTV is incredibly low, and we can't spend what we've been doing to acquire them. That kind of stuff I think is really interesting data that we can help companies unlock and that we've been trying to do. So
I love it. Cool. All right. So we've asked you someone else's question. Do you have any questions that come to mind that you would want to sort of pay forward to a next guest?
Yeah. No, the last one was a good one. Let's see here. I hadn't thought about it prior to coming on here, but
I know it's a bit of a gotcha.
I can think of something, and I'll send you a paid forward question for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Cool, man. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. I think there is so much to be done on as you said, right? If you're a PLG company and you haven't thought about cancellation yet or retention type work, I think there's so much opportunity in that. As you've shown, I love your website too. I think you've got some great stuff on there. It makes it painfully obvious to me that, this is an area that you should be paying attention to, I say that I should be paying attention to. And it's made me look at cancellation flows similar to yourself going through that. Again, we all churn sometimes, but I'm paying a lot more attention to what questions they're asking, if at all, and really if I can find that freaking cancellation button. Yeah, sometimes that's the hardest part.
Believe it or not, we're huge advocates for transparent cancellation process, but I think it's just only a good thing. There's a balance to be had there for sure.
Yeah. Well, listen, Tony, thank you so much for coming on. Absolutely love having you. I enjoyed this chat. And if anyone wants to go check out you or ProsperStack, where should we send them all?
Yeah, you can find us at prosperstack.com, or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Tony-Sternberg. We talk a lot about retention topics and various things. So if you're interested all in that, if you're in that space, we'd love to engage with you, whether it's for now or for later, doesn't matter. But yeah, I appreciate you having us on, Peter.
Thanks, Tony.